There is a secret that can change the way you see time, freedom, and life itself, and it is hiding in a forgotten lake in the United States. But beware, if you get in this place, you won't find answers. You'll lose something much more valuable, and you may never be the same again. I was there, and I found that simple life is not an escape. It's the center of everything. Today, I will show you what the lake has returned me, and what it has taken forever. Before continuing, just check it out if you already clicked the subscribe button. Have you noticed how in the United States the roads seem endless? Miles and miles of asphalt cutting forests, plains, cities that shine at night as artificial constellations. But there is a point where everything silences. A hidden lake, away from the roar of the highways, where Thoreau would have smiled as an old friend again. I got there at dawn. The air was so pure that it seemed to hurt in the lungs. The water, smooth as glass, reflected the sky to these. No luminous ads, no horn, only the insistent corner of a blackbird and the invisible sound of something breathing behind the trees. For a moment I wondered if the whole country was not an illusion, and that only there in that forgotten peace existed true America. Thoreau said that man is rich in the proportion of what he can dispense. Here, it made sense. The cell phone lost the signal. The clock stopped. And I realized perhaps what we call freedom is in fact the ability to become invisible to the world, but present to himself. Have you tried to disappear for a day? Not to escape, but to see. See really. Not outdoors, not showcases, not headlines. Seeing the slow movement of the water, the way a leaf goes down, the way the wind carries a secret that only listens to those who are willing to be silent. As the sun climbed, the lake surface began to change color, as if every minute were a new life. And there was a strange thought to me. Perhaps simple life is not about having less, but about seeing more. It is not the lack of things that set us free. It is the presence of meaning. Want to take this journey beyond the video? Download now totally for free the ebook The Secret of Eternal Life today, and find out how to apply in your real life the principles that have crossed centuries and changed destinations. Practical philosophy, deep inspiration, and exercises that can transform the way you see time, freedom, and purpose. Click the link in the description. Click the link set in the comments. Now download the free ebook and start today, because the best time to live forever, it's now. There, time seemed to bend. Every second expanded as if I wanted to tell me something I had never realized. And deep down, I felt there was a silent invitation. Stay. Not because the world out there doesn't matter, but because only here can you see it clearly. The problem is that not everyone wants to see. And who discovers this secret? It changes forever. Do you know what weighs most on America's shoulders? It is not the student debt, nor the credit card that barks like a hungry dog. It is the noise that enters without license. Notifications, breaking news, lightning promotions, distant sirens, an electric tinnitus that transforms the heart into a shot. And that's why that lake seemed a misdemeanor. Silence, this subversive luxury. I went down a narrow trail, on board leaves crackling under the boots. I remembered Walden, of course, but also from gas stations at 3 in the morning. Cold lights, burnt coffee, silent truckers. America runs on empty, I thought. Not of fuel, but of presence. Have you ever felt this deficit? The whole life in installments and notifications and rewards, while the body asks for something that the application does not deliver. Thoreau whisper, simplify. But here, simplifying is a political act. In suburbs with perfect lawns and condominium rules, simplify offend. When you say I don't need more, you threaten a system that lives on one more. One more promotion, another upgrade, one more like. The country of excess shaking in front of an honest cabin. There, bordering on the water, I did a foolish and dangerous experiment. I left the phone on the trunk and sat with nothing in my hands. The body strange. The mind ordered a candy. After a few minutes, something gave in, like a rope that stops vibrating. I started hearing ducks crossing the mirror, a dragonfly landing at the tip of a reed, the dry crack of a tree bark in the sun. Small miracles without sponsorship. I thought of American parks, Yosemite, Yellowstone, Acadia, and also in the giant warehouses that swallow, in Sunday's hurry to return what you never needed to buy. The contrast cut me as a blade. 2 overlapping homelands, one made of rock and water, one of the desire to possess. Which one is you feeding? I know it looks like utopia. Accounts there are, children exist, the boss's clock exists, but there is an internal adjustment that no one can prevent. You may be on the New York subway and enter a breathing woods. You can cross the I-95 and in an excerpt of silence between radios hear your own name. Simplicity begins as a fissure, a small, almost inaudible no that opens passage. In the reflection of the lake I saw two faces, mine rushes and another old patient unintended of showcase. Which one was I? When I turned to get my cell phone, I found something I didn't expect, printed on the sand. The brand of another recent deep, standing beside me enough to hear the same silence. It was not only nature watching, someone watched me. The foot brand was not common. There were no others around, as if the person had appeared there, and missing without walking. I was motionless, trying to hear some rustle between the trees. Nothing, just the distant tie lint from a wind of wind from some lost ranch in the woods. In the city, the stranger is noise. In the forest, the stranger is silence. This kind of silence that seems to look at you. And he was looking at the brand in the sand, I remembered. Thoreau wrote, as if talking to ghosts. Not the dead, but living that were no longer present. People who breathed but left the soul elsewhere, perhaps in line with a supermarket or the office control panel. Suddenly a shadow moved on the opposite bank. High, thin, with wide flap hat. You couldn't see your face, but there was something old in your posture, as if it didn't belong to this century. For a moment I thought it was just a fisherman. Then I realized there was no stick, no backpack, only him, and a notebook in his hands. Have you ever felt that someone is writing about you? As if at that very moment were your actions being aligned on an invisible page. The sensation traveled me like a cold wind. The man did not move. Me either. We only observe ourselves. Minutes stretched as if time had given up running. That's when he raised the notebook and by far pointed to the surface of the lake. As he says, "Look better." At first I saw nothing. Then I noticed a subtle drawing in the water, concentric circles coming from an invisible point in the center, as if something was touching the lake underneath, with the delicacy of those who write in the skin of the world. When I looked back at the opposite bank, he was no longer there. No trail, no noise, only the wind accelerating, pushing leaves over the brand, slowly erasing it. At that moment I understood a disturbing detail. The notebook he carried. It was identical to what I had left in the seat of my car, in the parking lot, almost a mile, and the question that crossed me was simple, but cold. What if it wasn't for him to watch me, but I was about to find me? I came back down the trail with quick steps, the heart beating as if each dry leaf was an alarm. The parking lot appeared between the trees, empty, except for my car. The door was closed. No sign of break-in, but in the passenger seat there was my notebook, open. I didn't remember to have left him like this. Leaves facing half, a page with my handwriting, and something new. The same letter, but not mine, filled half of the sheet. A short sentence. Simple life is not escape, it is reunion. Signed, HDT. The shock was physical. HDT, Henry David Thoreau. The mind ran to logical explanations. A game of some walker. Coincidence, memory failure. But none of this explained the same lyrics to what was in my dreams weeks before, when for the first time I thought of visiting this lake. In the United States, we get used to tracks. Cameras, records, profiles. Everything leaves footprint. But there, in the face of that sentence, I realized that there was a kind of presence that could not be captured by satellites or social networks. Something that crosses time, as if it were just another stream in the forest. I sat in the car and stared at the lake in the distance between trunks and reflexes. Thoreau lived in the 19th century, but his voice seemed to throb in the damp air of that place, as if to the lurking, waiting for someone to get tired of the noise to finally hear him. And maybe I had spent years preparing for it, even unknowingly. Have you noticed how certain meetings have no date? They seem written from always, but only happen when you're ready, or maybe when the world is ready for you to see. I closed the notebook and felt a lightweight, yes, lightweight, in the chest. It was like holding a key without knowing which door it opens, and at the same time, make sure it is not any door. I decided I wouldn't leave. Something pulled me back to the lake, but not to see what was in it, but to find out what was in me. On the trail back by the waterfront, I noticed another unsettling detail. The sun was already lower, gilding the leaves si omo if it was late afternoon. But by my watch, it had been just 20 minutes since I left. The time, it seemed, was being edited. The light of the late afternoon reflected in the lake as liquid gold, and yet it was too early for that tone. I walked to the bank, trying to ignore the cold climbing around the spine. Each step made the ranger floor as if the roots were keeping secrets. The surface was perfectly smooth, but in the center there was a dark point, a small submerged shadow. I leaned over. It looked metal. Then came the sudden recognition. It was a pocket clock, stuck between two stones in the shallow bottom. Oxidized metal denounced decades, perhaps a century. I knelt to get it. By touching the water, the world seemed to hold the breath. The air was heavy, as if each molecule had stopped to watch. I removed the clock, cold as if it came from winter, and to my astonishment, he was working. The pointer scored 7 and 15. Not in the morning, not the night, only 7 and 15, as if that were the only moment that mattered. You have already noticed how certain objects do not tell hours. They tell stories? This watch is not time. He mediates presence. It was as if he had kept the exact moment that someone, long before me, had the same meeting with the lake. I opened the lid and found something recorded, for the one who remembers looking. There was no name, there was no date, only the sentence and, in the background, a tiny drawing of a pine tree. The strangest, it was not wet inside. The mechanism, perfect, and each tish track seemed to mix with my heart until I could not distinguish which sound was from whom. I sat on the bank, holding the clock in my left hand and the notebook on the right. Together they formed an unlikely pair, as if one told me when and the other tell me why. And I realized that perhaps the simple life was just that, to find the right pace between time and meaning. But something changed in the lake while I breathed. The water began to erode slightly, even without wind. Small circles formed, and this time they didn't move away. Everything came to the center, as if the entire lake was being pulled to an invisible point. That's when I noticed a figure stopped on the other bank, in the same place as before, the wide tab hat, the property immovable, and instead of a notebook, he now held a watch just like mine. The lake seemed narrower than before, as if the distance between us had diminished without me a step. The figure on the opposite bank kept his gaze fixed, and something in his posture told me it was not a casual encounter. He raised his arm slowly, showing his clock, identical to mine, to the scratch on the lid. His pointer also marked 7 and 15, no more, no less. It was as if we were trapped at the same time, but in two worlds that only touched the surface of the water. Thoreau said that, "Time is not what the clock marks, but what the heart feels." I was beginning to understand perhaps that moment was not chronological but emotional. The clock served only as anchor. What if we both were the same anchor, attached to different sides of the same story? He made a simple gesture, pointing to his chest and then to me, as if to say, "We are the same." The idea gave me a physical chill, not for fear, but for sudden recognition. I remembered repeated dreams in which I watched someone at a distance, and as I approached found to be looking at myself. The water started to get cloudy in the center. A kind of liquid fog closed, hiding the reflection of the sky. The sound of the world diminished as if the lake was sucking all the noise into it. And then on the other side, the man opened the clock and plunged him to half in the water. In doing so, my clock in hand began to vibrate slightly, as if shared the same destination. Have you ever felt that something is about to pull you to a place where there is no return? Not necessarily dangerous, but definitive? The lake had this magnetism. It was not an invitation to swim, but to cross. Without thinking, I did the same. I opened the lid of my watch and dived it to the edge in the water. The moment the metal touched the surface, I felt a sudden tug, not in the arms, but in the mind. A sudden displacement, as if the world had turned inside out. When I raised my eyes, he was no longer on the opposite bank, but the reflection in the water showed two stopped figures where I was. The reflection in the water did not lie. I was there, and I was there too. Two versions of me side by side, real estate, as if the lake had doubled me. One of them breathed breathlessly, to hold the clock. The other, calm, with his arms loose and a look so deep that it seemed to cross layers of skin and memory. I tried to move, but it was like the floor had turned root and arrested me. The calm version stepped ahead in the reflection, approaching the surface. And so, I realized, it wasn't just calm. It was old. He carried the same patience as the Rocky Mountains, and the same indifference as millennial sequels. The surrounding air began to vibrate with a low, severe sound that came nowhere, as if time itself had to breathe. The reflex moved the lips, but the sound that came out was not human. It was the tickery of the clock. Regular, accurate, inevitable. Have you ever had the feeling that there is a version of you who know much more, and you live waiting for the right time to take control? The other version reached out by the reflection. The water did not wave. On the contrary, it hardened like glass, creating a solid surface between us. And yet I felt the touch. Ice cream. Familiar. It was then that I realized something disturbing. My reflection had no shadow behind him, but I had. A long shadow that stretched to the center of the lake, ending in a dark point that didn't seem to belong to this world. The clock vibrated again, now stronger. The minute pointer moved for the first time since I found him, and right now the calm version smiled, not with the lips but with the eyes, and disappeared. The surface was water again, and the sound of the wind filled the space. But the shadow behind me, I was still pointing to the center of the lake, and somehow I knew. It was an invitation. The shadow extended over the water seemed denser than the body itself. It did not fall apart with the movement of the waves. It was like it was stuck to another sun, an invisible sun that shone under the lake. I took a deep breath. The air had a metallic taste, as if time was rust. I walked to the edge, feeling the temperature drop every step. Silence was absolute, so absolute that the sound of my heart seemed to echo on the surface. In the center, the dark point pulsed, opening and closing like a giant pupil. And I knew, I didn't know how, but I knew that if I got in there, the clock and the notebook would no longer be objects, would become guides. You have been facing a choice that makes no sense to the world, but if ignored, you carry as a weight forever. It was that. I put the clock in my pocket and closed my eyes. The first thing I felt was the presence. Not a presence behind me, not by my side, but in me. A voice, or perhaps just a thought, whispered, "Simple life is not the opposite of complex life. It's her center." I opened my eyes. The banks had disappeared. There was only water as far as the view reached. On the liquid horizon, I saw small floating islands, each with a single tree. Some were green, some burned, some completely dry. I held the notebook. The cover was wet, but the pages dry. I opened in HDT's phrase, and now, below it, there was a second line that did not exist before. "Choose the island." The watch in his pocket began to burn against my leg. I took it and realized that the pointers moved fast, spinning nonstop, but they always went back to 7 and 15. Always. I looked again at the islands. The nearest had a tall pine tree, the same symbol recorded on the clock. On the trunk, something shone under the impossible light that came from the sky without sun, and before I could think twice, the water began to move alone, forming a narrow path that connected my feet to the base of that pine tree. The solid water path under my feet ranged slightly, as if breathed. With each step, the lake seemed to hear. There was no wind, but the pine ahead swung slowly, emitting a low sound like a whisper in an old language. Upon arriving on the island, I realized that she was smaller than it seemed. Only the pine tree and a circle of moss stones. On the trunk, an object hanging from a thin current. A key, small aged metal with teeth that looked like handicapped. When I touched her, I felt something moving under the earth. The floor trembled, and between the stones came a wooden box, as if it had expected centuries for that moment. On the top, a carved inscription, "For when you remember who you are." The box had no lock, but the key seemed necessary. I put it in the center of the lid, and she sank alone, spinning like it was pulled inside. The wood opened with a snap. Inside, just a folded paper. The texture was old, but the calligraphy, it was mine. I read it in a low voice. "You have not come to the lake to find answers. He came to return questions that do not belong to you. The man you have seen is no other. That's what's left when everything that is false crumbles." With each word, the air became denser. The pine tree began to spill small drops of golden resin, which fell into the lake like stars sinking. The clock in my pocket vibrated again, but this time, when I looked, he scored 7 and 16. Have you ever felt that a minute can change the whole architecture of your life? It was at this moment that I realized the water around the island was rising, slow but constant. It was not a threat, it was notice. The feeling was clear. If I wanted to leave, I would have to decide now. I looked at the roll again and noticed something that was not there before. One last sentence, written in the footer, with still fresh paint. "Don't go back through the water. Go back through silence." When I raised my eyes, the liquid trail was gone. Around only the infinite mirror of the lake, and the sound of my own breathing. The lake closed around me as if to keep me. Without the solid water trail, the reflection was only left. And in it, I wasn't alone. Behind me in the liquid mirror, the figure appeared with the wide flap hat, but when it turns to face, nothing, only the pine and the stones. I came back my look down. In the reflection, he remained motionless, and now I could see my face, mine, but marked by wrinkles that I haven't lived yet. It was like looking at a future that somehow knew me. The words on paper echoed, "Come back by silence." I closed my eyes, trying to understand. The sound of the lake disappeared. The rustle of the leaves ceased. Even the clock ticker disappeared. I felt my body dissolve in the absence of noise, as if I was made of sound layers being removed one by one. When I opened my eyes, there was no lake anymore. I was standing on a dirt road flanked by huge oaks which formed a green tunnel. In the background, a soft light called me. No noise, no wind, just the sound of my breath, and I realized that even she was slower, as synchronized with something bigger. I walked. With each step, forgotten memories came back. Cold mornings where nothing was but the smell of coffee. Summer afternoons when time seemed to last longer than the day. Starring nights when I felt I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. It was as if silence returned everything the noise had stolen. At the end of the road, a wooden bench. About him, the notebook, closed, dry, with no signs that I had traveled with me. I sat down, opened it, and saw that all the pages were filled, but not with text, with reflexes. Each leaf was like a piece of mirror, showing scenes of my life that have not yet happened. Have you ever felt that the future is watching, waiting to see if you will have the courage to get to it? The last page reflected nothing, just a dark, deep surface. When I played, she gave way like water, and in a second, I was pulled inside. The dark page swallowed me without noise, as if the sound had been abolished forever. When I opened my eyes, it was back on the original margin of the lake. The sun shone high as if nothing had happened. The car in the parking lot, the bank empty. No sign of the man, the pine, the islands. But the clock was still in my pocket, and now he marked 7 and 17. 1 more minute, or a minute less. Time, I realized, had not been forward, had spinned in a circle. I sat on the edge, opening the notebook. All the pages were blank. There was only one sentence in the first. Magic life is not what you find, but what you dare to return. It was at this moment that I understood. The lake had not given me answers. He had taken me in a hurry to have them. And that was freedom. You who are listening to me now, maybe you feel you need to run after something. But what if, deep down, what do you seek is what is already silent inside you? What if simple life is not an escape, but the exact center of what you are? I closed the notebook, kept my clock, and got up. Before I left, I looked one last time to the surface. For a moment, I saw a reflection with the wide flap hat waving before dissolving in the light. The circle was complete, or maybe just starting. If you felt that this story has moved something inside you, like, share, and subscribe, so more people will find that there is a way to simplicity and silence, and that this way can start now. Activate the bell so as not to lose the next video, where we will reveal what was behind the lake. If this journey has touched something inside you, don't let that silence die. Enjoy this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell, so more people will find that there is a way to simple and magical life. Share with someone who needs to slow down and remember who is really. In the next episode, we will cross the invisible border of the lake and reveal what was watching us all the time. You are not prepared, but you need to see.